Alright, so today we're going to plan for a sew along, and we are going to use one of the vintage mystery blocks from our sew along in 2022 called the Cactus Pot. And if you all participated in that, you are familiar with this block. However, this time, instead of letting them be towards this direction, we're going to set them on point like that. Today I have drawn out for you a kind of a mock-up on as best as I could on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper to show you how that's going to happen. Now, everywhere you see the word CP, that is your cactus block quilt. There are 12 of them. So according to the directions, you can go ahead and make your cactus pot blocks the same way that you did on the vintage mystery sew along that we had. I have done a ton of math here to figure out how we're going to get these set on point and what we're going to put in between. Referring back to this little mock-up here, every other block is going to be a large scale fabric. I've used the letter F for floral because if you have a large floral or a large non-directional print that you would like to use to complement your cactus pot blocks, that would be ideal. We're not putting any sashing or cornerstones or anything in this, just to keep it simple. So in order for that to look kind of dramatic, you want to use a large scale floral for these, or some sort of large scale print that you have that's non-directional. Now, here is about what the size of the quilt will be. And I'm going to get this up here. I don't think you can see this, but I'm just going to kind of go over with you my thought process on this quilt. It's going to wind up being approximately 50 by 70, more or less, give or take a couple inches. Depending on, everybody's quarter inch is different, everybody's cutting is a little different sometimes, so I'm just saying as a general rule, 50 by 70, it'll probably be a little bit wider than 50. These on-point blocks that we're going to do out of the floral or the large scale print, we're going to have 2¼ yards of fabric for that. So that's your biggest cut of fabric you're going to need. If you've got 2¼ yards of something large scale non-directional, that will work as a measurement for you. 2¼ yards. All of this will be in the description box in a nicely arranged PDF like this one. So I'm just kind of telling you right now what this is going to be, and then you can print off anything you need afterwards from those PDFs to have on hand, so that you don't have to watch the video a million times. But you can watch the video a million times. Be my guest. So we're going to subcut those into that 2¼ yards. We're going to subcut it into two 12.5 inch strips, and from that we're going to end up with 6 12.5 by 12.5. Now you remember our cactus block finishes at 12.5, not sewn in to the quilt. So that's what we want our complementary blocks to be as well. And then also we're going to cut 3 18 3/4 inch squares from that, and then cut each of those squares diagonally in both ways to get our corner edge pieces here. That'll be 12 side triangles is what I'm calling them, or border triangles. It's not really a border, but you know what I mean. And then the third cut from your 2¼ yards will be 2 9 3/4 inch squares that will be cut once diagonally, and that's your actual corners that you're going to have. My illustration here is not to scale, but yes, these will all be the same size, 9 3/4. So that'll be your large scale print in between your cactus blocks. Now your cactus blocks will you'll make 12 of those, and you'll need a 1 1/4 yard of background. And as you remember from this, the background that I used on mine was like just a unbleached muslin. So you want to use something that's complementary to the colors that you're using, but not anything big print. You could use tone on tone possibly, but I would suggest maybe using a white, off-white, black, a solid of any color really. Light I think would be better in my opinion, some sort of light color. And then your cactus plant, this dark part that you see here, you're going to need 3/4 yard of that. And then for your pots down here, this lighter green that I've got here is also 3/4 yard. So you need 2 1/4, 1 1/4, 3/4, and 3/4 of different fabrics. The subcuts for those cactus blocks will be in these instructions here. So you can go to your original pattern if you still have that, or you can print it out from this video in the description box. Now for your 12 blocks, you need to cut 72 3.5 inch background pieces, 72 4-inch background pieces. And then for your cactus pot, you need 12 3.5 pieces and 72 4-inch pieces. And then for your pots, you need 12 3.5 inch pieces and 48 4-inch pieces. Those are all of your subcuts for your 3 individual fabrics that will make up your cactus blocks. And then I put as a little suggestion down here that you could have a binding of 1/2 yard, and that would create 7 2.5 inch strips with the fabric. So that would finish off your quilt. I'm not including borders on this quilt, but you certainly can calculate some borders up and put that on there. As many borders and as wide as you want. Complementary to the fabrics that you're using, or reusing a fabric within that you've used in your design. So what's fun about this sew along is you're going to be able to create your own color scheme. You can pull from your stash, pull some things together. You can certainly go out and buy a whole color palette of fabrics that complement each other on a cactus theme, or it doesn't even have to be a cactus theme. This is a vintage block that was called Cactus Pot back in the 30s. I happen to be using cactus themed fabric, but you do not have to do that. You can make your cactus pots as regular flower pots and do each one of them in different flowers. Do all of your pots different. Whatever. It's going to be up to you. But I am going to show you what I'm doing, and then also some other suggestions that I pulled from my stash that I could have done but didn't choose, but certainly would be good options. Here I have what I'm going to use. Okay. So here's my actual cactus pot fabric that I love. And yes, it is directional. So I am going to have to cut this on the diagonal. And I'm going to have to be very careful when I sew it, so as not to stretch it. As we know, sewing on the diagonal, stretching is an issue. And we'll talk about that later on in future videos on the sew along, when we get to that point. What I have chosen to use is this for my large scale blocks, my 12.5 inch large scale blocks. I do have way more than 2 1/4 here, so I think I'm going to be able to pull that off, cutting those on the diagonal. This print right here is a tilde print, and it's actually apple trees. If you can look there, you can see that these are some bushy trees, and it has these little dots in it, and branches, and the trunk are a lighter green, and then there's like an off-white in there, and the leaves are tealish kind of green. So yeah, these are apple trees, but I think once I cut these up into a whole bunch of pieces, they're going to make great cactuses. I think it's going to give the right look to it. And if you look down on the register of this, it's got kind of an olive color, a dark green, 2 shades of teal, a bright green, and then that beige. So I think all of those are in the range of what cactuses, the colors of cacti are. So I'm going to use that. And then for the background, I am using a tone on tone. This is an Art Gallery Fabrics tone on tone. It kind of has a get it a little bit closer to you. It has a little bit of a, I don't know what you would call that. The design is kind of a wavy stick kind of thing. So I think that'll give a little texture, as well as coordinating really well with this tweedy background in this. This is kind of a taupey cream color that looks woven, and I think this will complement that. Plus this will be cut up into all different sorts of shapes with our half square triangles, and it'll be turned and tossed around in such a way that I'm going to try to do that, at least try to get it to where I don't have like stripes of this going or just going one way, but rather move them around so that they create movement. And then for my cactus pots, I went around and around about this, but this is what I think I'm going to use. I have some leftovers of the Nocturnal that I used on that table runner a few months ago. And then I also have this line that I've never used. It was a fat quarter bundle. Let me see. This one has dogs on it. And I'm going to try to get a couple of those dogs. I think I've got enough here to make two pots out of each one of these. So I'm going to try to get a couple of these dogs out of here and try to get them on my pot to where you can see that that's actually a dog. This is called Dog on It. Dog on It. But it also has this and this. So I think those are going to just like really, you know, all those greens are popping out. And my cactus pot fabric down here has fuchsia and red and orange, and all of those colors are in there too. So I'm just going to kind of do a medley of pots on my cactus pots and see how that turns out. I thought, you know, all of these pots are kind of varied and different, and I wanted something in the black category. I didn't care for the fact that these have like a pure white in them, but I think once the pieces are all cut up and everything, that'll kind of disappear. There's not that much. I may not even use that one. I'm not sure. We'll see. I also thought of using and this is a good tip for you too, if you have a charm pack available that would work well for your pots, a charm pack is 3/4 of a yard. So there's a very good chance you could get all of your pots out of a charm pack. You could also get all of your cactuses out of a charm pack, possibly. So look at your charm packs and see what you have too. Don't exclude those just because they're a pre-cut. And if you were short a little bit, you might be able, like in this case, black and white. Of course, I could just pick another one of these out to add to it if I was running short. But I calculated we needed 3/4 of a yard, and that's what a charm pack is. Okay, some other selections that I pulled out. I'm going to pull my green out because this is what I'm using for the cacti. I'm just going to kind of do this way so that, well, maybe, so that we could kind of see what's going on here. I thought it would be cool to do a, what's it called? A clay pot. I didn't have a true clay color, but I thought this might be cool to do if you can find a clay color in your stash. I also liked this, which has that, it does have a clay color in it. That might work good even for your cactus end of it if you didn't want to go the green route. So that would be cool. And then I also thought, what about having like that Asian pottery look? You could use that for your pots, and then if you had another one that coordinated with it, I thought that would make a cool pot. If you had another one that would coordinate with it that was of a bigger scale that you could use for your big floral plain blocks, or maybe you even have, I've seen, well, actually I have a piece of it here. It's not blue, but in Tilda, I don't know if they have a blue in the Tilda, but if you look here, these are those pots I'm speaking of. So if you had a print like this that had those pots on it, you could use those as your big floral blocks. So there's just all kinds of possibilities. Look in your stuff before you go decide to buy anything, because more than likely you do have something that will work. And I went around and around about color on mine, and this is what I've settled upon, and I hope I don't change my mind before I start cutting. But I don't think I will. So there it is. That's going to be my cactus pot quilt on point. So stay tuned for next week. We'll be doing some cutting and some sewing and some more instruction on this sew along. It's going to be super easy. This is not an intermediate or difficult pattern. It is on point, but we're still sewing straight lines. So hang in there and try it out, because putting blocks on point really adds a lot of cool interest to your quilts. So go ahead and print off your PDFs from the description box and get started looking through your fabric, and I'll see you next week.